The HOA president was standing in my driveway, waving a tape measure, when she announced I owed $60,000 for a crack in the concrete. That was the moment I realized Deirdre Kingsley Morales III, self-appointed queen of our subdivision, had finally lost her grip on reality. She stood there in orthopedic wedges and a visor with her last name embroidered on it, flanked by 2 board members holding clipboards like royal guards. I didn't say much. Just watched as they pointed at my slightly off-white mailbox and whispered as if they'd found a crime scene. According to the notice she slapped onto my door with industrial tape, I was guilty of 3 major violations: 1. A hairline crack in the driveway; 2. A non-HOA-approved shade of beige on my garage door, which hadn't been repainted since I bought the house; and 3. My front bush extended 2.3 inches beyond the maximum shrubbery radius as defined on page 72, subsection D, of the HOA Landscaping Addendum. Total fines with interest, $60,183.47. Payable in full within 30 days or face lien, foreclosure, and HOA litigation. I live in a neighborhood where people fight over mailbox heights like it's the Alamo, so this wasn't entirely surprising. What was surprising was the new claim in the final paragraph of the violation notice. Driveway access subject to HOA review and revocation pending compliance. Driveway access. As in my driveway. The concrete I poured and maintained. Deirdre stood there smugly like she just outlawed gravity. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I signed for the notice, nodded once, and asked if she was finished measuring things that didn't belong to her. She gave me the same look I imagine she gives her husband when he forgets to fluff the throw pillows. I closed the door and made a cup of coffee, then sat down at my desk and did what I do best: research. You see, I'm not just a homeowner. I'm a retired military engineer and current cybersecurity consultant. My hobbies include dismantling problems and making aggressive spreadsheets. I pulled up the county property records, zoning ordinances, easement agreements, and original subdivision plats. Everything Deirdre claimed about the driveway turned out to be not just wrong, but fabricated. The easement my driveway sits on predates the HOA's existence by 23 years. It was created as a municipal utility and access route when the land was first zoned, and it had never been transferred or claimed by the HOA. The mistake? They assumed it was common property because it ran adjacent to the cul-de-sac. No one ever bothered to check. But that's not even the good part. The good part came when I found a series of amendments to the HOA charter, mysteriously filed after the last board vote, amendments that claimed exclusive HOA control over all ingress and egress routes, including driveways. Guess who filed them? Todd Morales, HOA legal counsel, also known as Deirdre's son-in-law. At this point, I began to suspect this wasn't about a crack in the concrete. This was a shakedown. The following morning, I took a pleasant drive to the county recorder's office, where I pulled the official plat map and title history. I asked if anyone had transferred the easement rights to the HOA. The clerk laughed. "They don't own that strip," she said, pointing at my driveway on the map. "That's still municipal access property. Not even taxable. Utility district has it. HOA can't touch it. Can I buy it?" I asked. She blinked. "Buy it?" I nodded. "Yeah. I want it. All of it. Turns out, you can acquire unused or unclaimed municipal easements if you have a valid purpose and the district doesn't need them anymore. It's rare, but it happens." I filed the paperwork that day under a shell LLC and offered the district a small payment and full assumption of liability. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not yet. Because the thing about people like Deirdre is, they never expect consequences. They run on fear and assumptions. If you don't bark back, they think you're weak. They think you're beat. That's when they really screw up. A week later, Deirdre hand-delivered a final notice of violation to my front porch. It was stapled to a manila envelope with photos of my driveway and a highlighted sentence that read, "Failure to pay will result in driveway access being revoked and alternate ingress routes assigned by the HOA." I opened the door while she was still standing there, Oh, thank you, I said, taking the envelope. You're right on time. For what? She asked, narrowing her eyes. I handed her a certified letter. From the county clerk's office. It confirms I now own the easement. Her face tightened like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. You can't just own the driveway, she hissed. Not the driveway. The easement. The land underneath it. Which, legally, means I control access. HOA never filed a claim. So now, it's private. LLC owned? With rights of passage determined by me? You're bluffing. No, I said. But Todd might be. Those forged charter addendums? I made copies. I'm sure the State Bar will be interested. She sputtered something about calling an emergency board meeting. I wished her luck and gently closed the door. Inside, I poured another cup of coffee and stared out the window. For the first time in months, the view of my cracked driveway looked perfect. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But now, it was going to be my game. Within 72 hours, I had the easement paperwork expedited. The utility district didn't care who owned the land as long as liability transferred and their service access remained untouched. A quiet check from my LLC, some notarized signatures, and boom, ownership transferred. Just like that, I controlled the land beneath the driveways of 5 homes, including mine. None of them knew. The HOA certainly didn't. I waited. Deirdre doubled down. The next HOA bulletin accused me of escalating defiance, and urged residents to prepare for a special assessment to fund legal action. She used the term threat to communal order 3 times in the same paragraph. A week later, HOA attorney Todd sent me a cease and desist letter full of typos and legal fluff. I responded with one sentence. Please direct future correspondence to the property owner and easement controller, Sable Point Infrastructure Holdings LLC. They didn't like that. The retaliation started immediately. An HOA inspector knocked on my door at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, citing me for an unauthorized garden gnome and a flag that violates vertical orientation guidelines. The flag was an American flag. The gnome was wearing a hard hat. I logged everything: photos, timestamps, audio, full documentation. By Friday, I had 4 new violation notices, 3 anonymous complaints, and a friendly visit from code enforcement, who found nothing wrong. The officer looked embarrassed just standing there. They said you were building a weapons-grade antenna array. It's a hammock pole, I replied. Yeah, I figured. Meanwhile, I went deeper. I wanted to know what made people like Deirdre believe they were untouchable. That's when I started requesting HOA financial disclosures. Took some pressure and 2 legal demand letters, but I got them. And what I found? A buffet of corruption served cold. First, the landscaping company hired for mandatory beautification projects was owned by Deirdre's nephew. They'd been billing triple the market rate. Second, the HOA had been issuing late dues fees to select residents who hadn't actually missed payments, padding their revenue while threatening foreclosure. And third, several expense reports showed personal meals, weekend getaways, and board enrichment retreats, paid from HOA funds. All signed off by Todd. All with board approval. And all illegal. So I kept digging. I filed a formal complaint with the State HOA Oversight Board. Then I filed a tip with the county's fraud division. I didn't say anything to Deirdre. I wanted her to feel safe, invincible, even smug. I wanted her to send me just one more threat. She did. A courier dropped off a thick envelope labeled Final Notice of Enforcement Action. Inside was a bold claim. The HOA had voted to revoke my driveway access permanently. They were placing pylons to close the easement and restore community safety. I laughed. By that afternoon, a licensed contractor, mine, installed a steel retractable gate across the easement entrance, connected to a keypad and camera system. HOA members were locked out. Literally. That night, chaos. 4 board members showed up, banged on the gate, called my name like angry spirits. I didn't answer. The next morning, every house on the block received a flyer from the HOA warning of a hostile property blockade enacted by a rogue homeowner. The wording was priceless. Rogue. Like I was a villain in a James Bond movie. One neighbor tried to drive around the barrier, got stuck in the grass, and called Deirdre screaming. 2 others came to my door privately and asked what was happening. I told them the truth. Showed them the paperwork. Their eyes widened when they saw the signatures. You own the road? I own the easement. You've been paying the HOA to use land they didn't control. Now it's mine. The ripple effect hit fast. Trash collection was delayed. Delivery drivers got confused. School buses rerouted. The HOA tried to send a locksmith to breach the gate. I called the sheriff, showed my easement deed, and watched the locksmith get escorted off the property. Deirdre's next move was a forced emergency HOA meeting in the community center. She called me out by name, described me as a domestic saboteur, and proposed a special motion, total expulsion from the HOA. The room buzzed with murmurs, but I had someone on the inside. Mark Riedel. Accountant. Mild-mannered. Had been on the board for years, quietly watching. Mark was fed up. He'd been ignored, overridden, and gaslit by the rest of them for trying to enforce transparency. That night, he texted me a voice memo from inside the meeting, Deirdre admitting she never verified the easement ownership, calling it a paperwork technicality. She even joked, "What's he gonna do, sue us for lying?" Actually, yes. I forwarded the recording to my attorney, who filed a pre-litigation demand for fraud, harassment, and unlawful denial of access. We also submitted a formal ethics complaint against Todd for filing forged charter amendments. The lawyer's office confirmed the signatures were mismatched. Then we sent everything, emails, minutes, altered filings, to the State Bar Association and the Attorney General. Still, they pushed. 2 more citations arrived claiming my home's aesthetic harmony rating had dropped below minimum threshold due to hostile architecture. Hostile architecture, they meant, was the gate. The same gate legally placed on my land. That's when I started mailing formal notices to the entire neighborhood, every house on the HOA registry. Each letter contained a simple message. Did you know your driveway may be built on land owned by an external party? Did you know the HOA never secured those rights? Legal documentation enclosed. I didn't need them to panic. I just needed them to doubt. And they did. I began getting calls from homeowners who'd been fined hundreds for imaginary violations. One elderly couple asked me if the HOA could still charge them for painting their door red last year. I said, "Not if there's no HOA left." It was time to prepare the final move. I'd exposed their foundation. Now I was going to rip it out. The gate changed everything. Not just physically, psychologically. Overnight, the HOA went from smug overseers to people on the outside, literally locked out of their own illusion of control. It was the first time they had to walk around anything. The shortcut they'd used for years was now sealed with a keypad, a camera, and a placard that read, "Private easement. Authorized access only. No HOA jurisdiction." Residents didn't know what to do. Some followed the new route in silence. Some called the HOA. Some called me. I gave no answers. Let the discomfort set in. Let them ask questions the HOA couldn't answer. Within days, Deirdre sent a neighborhood-wide email accusing me of constructing a private fortress and endangering the fluid integrity of communal navigation. I printed it, framed it, and hung it in my garage. The HOA tried to file an injunction to force me to take the gate down, but the judge denied it immediately. The documents were clear. The easement was private, and I'd installed a legal, code-compliant barrier on property I now owned. That denial hit them hard. Their tone shifted fast. The next week, they tried appeasement. An invitation to rediscuss the matter of easement usage in a cooperative spirit. It was addressed to my LLC. It arrived alongside a second envelope, this one from a law firm I'd never heard of, offering to purchase the easement back for $8,000, citing Shared interest in peaceful community coexistence. I declined both. Politely. Legally. Finally. Deirdre didn't take rejection well. She sent an inspector to measure the shadow of my gate, and claimed it exceeded the permissible length during summer solstice hours. Then she tried to fine me for non-regulation lighting fixtures. I didn't respond. I forwarded each notice to my attorney with a one-word subject line: ammunition. The best part? Every one of her letters came with a timestamp, proof of continued harassment, documented efforts to circumvent legal ownership, and attempted misuse of HOA authority. But the real power move came when I noticed a footnote buried in a recent HOA meeting agenda. Proposal to initiate temporary easement rerouting via emergency board vote. Rerouting? That was bold. I knew exactly where they'd try, through the east side of the cul-de-sac, over a parcel of land nobody used. The thing is, I'd already acquired that one too. Quietly. Months ago. The day they broke ground, small flags and survey tape, I was already on site with a cease and desist order in one hand and a folded deed in the other. When the contractor saw it, he packed up without a word. The HOA board stood in a loose, embarrassed circle while I explained calmly that they had just attempted an illegal incursion onto private property. A civil trespass, actually. And that further attempts would be met with both litigation and full press coverage. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. Just turned, walked back through the gate, and let it close behind me. They didn't try again. By now, residents were restless. Cars lined up awkwardly every morning. Deliveries delayed. Kids late for school. Garbage trucks honked and reversed. People started to knock on my door again, not with threats, but with questions. Is it true they never owned the road? Yes. So all these years? Yep. Some were angry. Some ashamed. Most confused. That's when I printed up a flyer. 1 page. No branding. Just facts. HOA cannot regulate what it doesn't own. Easement is privately held. Past fines collected on invalid grounds. Your dues? Supporting a fraud. I distributed 200 of them. Overnight, 6 homes canceled their HOA auto payments. By the weekend, 10 more demanded full accounting of their fines. Deirdre went into PR overdrive, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. That the gate was symbolic and meant to spark community dialogue. I responded by installing a small speaker beside the gate. Motion activated. It played the phrase, "Access restricted by deed. Contact your HOA for clarification." I watched from my window as board members froze in place hearing it. Then came the real unraveling. Mark, my quiet ally on the inside, delivered the coup de grace: internal emails, minutes, recordings. Proof that the HOA had knowingly forged documents, inflated fines, and even tampered with vote counts to pass emergency measures. One message from Deirdre read, "He thinks he's smart. Let's bury him in process until he sells." I published the materials anonymously. Dropbox link. Password protected. Sent to every homeowner with the subject line, "Want to know where your dues went." The fallout was immediate. The next HOA meeting was packed. More attendees than ever before. Some hadn't been to a single board session in 10 years. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. By the end of the night, 2 board members resigned. One claimed medical reasons. The other just walked out mid-sentence. Deirdre clung to her chair like it was a lifeboat. The residents voted to initiate a full audit. Demand full transparency. Freeze new assessments. It was beautiful. But I wasn't done. I filed a formal complaint with the Department of Real Estate. HOA violations. Unlawful governance. Breach of fiduciary duty. I also had my attorney initiate discovery proceedings for a lawsuit. Name: Sable Point Infrastructure Holdings LLC v. Kingsley Morales et al. We requested all financial records. Every check, every reimbursement, every landscaping invoice. Under oath. I heard Deirdre called an emergency meeting in her home after that. A desperate scramble. She even offered to step down if we agreed to drop the lawsuit. We didn't. That week, I made my last move. I bought the small strip of green space next to the HOA clubhouse. The one where they hosted events, barbecues, and their little Community Appreciation Day. I made a single change, installed a private sign with the words, "No trespassing. HOA not welcome." They held their next meeting in someone's garage. And me? I sat back, coffee in hand, and waited for the whole rotten structure to finish collapsing. They tried to fight back, but it was like watching toddlers throw gravel at a tank. Deirdre sent out a community defense bulletin, warning residents of aggressive anti-HOA sabotage tactics, and encouraging them to report any unusual behavior to the board. They even suggested I might be working with a larger organization intent on destabilizing HOA communities nationwide. I suppose in her mind, I'd become some kind of suburban terrorist, armed with zoning laws and a paper trail. The HOA didn't file real lawsuits. They filed threats dressed in legalese, letters loaded with may, could, and pending review. I responded with real filings, signed and stamped. Declarations. Injunctions. Discovery requests. I wasn't bluffing. I was building a case. While they were scribbling notes on clipboards, I was working with a certified forensic accountant. We tore through their financials like wolves. Every misused check. Every invoice to a family-owned business. Every vendor paid without a competitive bid. We documented it all. Embezzlement? Not hard to prove when you have scanned receipts for dinners at steakhouses labeled as emergency HOA strategy sessions. They had no idea what to do. Meetings grew tense. Deirdre lost her composure in front of half the neighborhood during a heated exchange with a former supporter who dared to ask where the road maintenance budget had gone. Her response? We had to reallocate it due to external disruptions. Meaning me. I watched the power drain out of her face day by day. She stopped looking smug and started looking tired. Desperate. But she still wouldn't stop. The HOA began sending citations to my neighbors, people who had spoken to me, parked near my easement gate, even stood in their own driveways for excessive loitering. One man got fined for a barbecue smoker, visible from the street on a non-designated cook day. They were lashing out. But it wasn't working anymore. I'd flipped the board's own favorite weapon, petty enforcement, against them. I began compiling a harassment index, a spreadsheet tracking every bogus citation, every retaliatory action, and linking it to which board member initiated it. When one woman was cited twice in a day, I added a section for frequency analysis. Patterns emerged. Targeting. Discrimination. Selective enforcement. Then came the media. A local journalist who lived 2 neighborhoods over got wind of what was happening. He knocked on my door, introduced himself, and said, "So, did you really buy the road?" I nodded. "Mind if I do a story? I'd be disappointed if you didn't." The piece aired 2 weeks later. Locked out, when one man bought the road and beat the HOA at their own game. It went viral. Reddit. YouTube. Nextdoor exploded with comments, half of them cheering, the other half asking if I'd start a consulting firm. Strangers sent coffee. A company offered to sponsor my legal fees. The pressure cooked the board alive. HOA membership dropped. Homeowners stopped paying dues. The ones who stayed began demanding full audits, new elections, and immediate bylaw reforms. The board voted to remove the clause allowing them to fine residents for infractions that undermine visual harmony. By then, it was too late. Deirdre made one last push. She held a town integrity forum at the community center. Tried to spin everything. She claimed the forged documents were a clerical error. That I was an opportunist. That everything I did was a personal vendetta. Her voice cracked halfway through. A few loyalists clapped. Most just stared. Several had brought their violation notices with them. One woman stood up and read her last 5 citations aloud. One was for outdoor lighting audible from the sidewalk. Audible. she asked. Do you even know what that means? Silence. I wasn't even at the meeting. I didn't have to be. Mark, still inside, recorded everything. Deirdre was interrupted 3 times by residents yelling, "Resign!" She didn't. She just kept talking, like she could outlast the truth if she talked long enough. She couldn't. 3 board members quit the next day. One sent me a private email thanking me for blowing the lid off a dumpster fire. Another offered to testify in court if needed. I added them both to my witness list. The lawsuits were moving forward now. My attorney filed for a summary judgment to seize HOA financial assets, citing fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The forensic reports we compiled showed over $230,000 in improperly spent funds over 7 years. Trips, gifts, payments to relatives. The HOA bank account was hemorrhaging. Legal defense drained the rest. Then came the foreclosure threats. Yes, the HOA tried to lean on residents who'd stopped paying dues. But my legal team countered fast. We filed to freeze all enforcement actions pending outcome of the fraud trial. Once the judge signed that order, the HOA had no teeth left. They couldn't collect, couldn't fine, couldn't even send demand letters without risking more charges. They were paralyzed. So I struck the final blow. I bought the clubhouse. Not in my name, of course. Through the same LLC that held the easements. The county held an asset auction after the HOA defaulted on several utility payments. The clubhouse was listed with no minimum. No one bid. Except me. I paid less than a used Honda. Then I changed the locks. Posted new signage. No HOA access. Ever. When Deirdre drove by and saw it, she stopped her car and just sat there. Didn't get out. Didn't scream. Just stared. A few neighbors waved at her. She didn't wave back. A week later, I turned the clubhouse into a free-use community space. No dues. No oversight. No dress code. Just people using a building they technically already owned before it got hijacked by a board that thought petty tyranny was a leadership skill. And the gate? Still locked. Still standing. A quiet reminder that some lines, once drawn, don't open both ways.